In this video, I shall show you how the role-based access control or RBAC system within the Radicore framework can be configured, and then how it works at runtime. What is role-based access control? Within any enterprise application, you may have a large number of tasks, which are user transactions or use cases, which can be performed, and a large number of users who can access that application. However, it is most unlikely that you would want any user to be able to run any task, as certain tasks should only be accessible to those users whose job actually requires it. What is required is a mechanism which allows the system supervisor to specify which users can access which tasks. This is commonly known as an access control list, or ACL. Rather than having a separate access control list for each individual user, which could mean duplicating the entire list for each user who shares the same permissions, a more efficient and flexible approach would be to grant permissions to roles and then assign these roles to the relevant users. Each arrow in this database diagram indicates a one-to-many relationship where the arrowhead points to the many. Where a table is the many in two relationships, it is actually the intersection table in what is known as a many-to-many relationship. This structure allows a single user to be linked to many roles and a single role to be linked to many users. Similarly, a single task can be linked to many roles and a single role can be linked to many tasks. In a large ERP application which has been broken down into separate subsystems, a common practice which I use is to start by creating two roles for each subsystem, one with access to all the tasks within that subsystem and another which can only access the read-only tasks. I shall now run you through the steps I take to configure the role-based access control data. I start by logging onto the framework, go into the menu subsystem and select all tasks. On the search screen, I set the subsystem to the data dictionary in order to limit the search to show just those entries for that subsystem. Here you can see that there are a total of 60 tasks. If I press reset, this removes the selection criteria to show all 840 tasks. If I press previous search, it will reinstate the previous search criteria and show just 60 entries. I shall now go into the roles screen to maintain user roles. Here you can see that I have set up several roles already. Each of these roles must specify a starting task which must be a menu. I have one role which has global access. This is for use by system supervisors so that they have unrestricted access to every part of the application. Other roles must identify individual task entries. I usually limit each role to tasks within a particular subsystem. For this video, I shall concentrate on two particular tasks for the data dictionary subsystem. One which has access to all tasks, and the second which has access to only those read-only tasks. So I select that role followed by the Task Access button. By default, this starts by showing all available entries, but I can reinstate the previous selection criteria, which then limits the selection to the 60 entries in the data dictionary subsystem. Those entries with the checkbox turned on in the select column are accessible to this role, while those with the checkbox turned off are not. Adding or removing tasks from a role is as easy as toggling the checkbox and pressing the submit button. The default size of a list screen is 10 rows per page, but can be changed by using the hyperlinks in the top right-hand corner. By scanning this list, you should see that I have granted access only to tasks which read from the database. I can change the contents of the screen by returning to the search screen and adjusting the search criteria. I can limit the selection to only those entries which are turned on, which is 38 out of the 60, or only those entries which are turned off, which is 22 of the 60. I shall now return to the previous screen and select the role which allows access to everything within the data dictionary subsystem. At present it shows all tasks and nothing is selected, so I shall use the previous search screen to limit the selection to only those entries within the data dictionary. Now again, there is nothing selected here, so in order to select everything I can press the Select All hyperlink followed by a Submit button, and that will add 60 records to the role task table. So now if I go in and select the ones which have been selected again, see here there are 60. If I go in and select ones which haven't been chosen yet, the screen is empty. Now I shall go into the users page to show you how to link users to roles. Here you can see there are several administrators with global access. All other users have access to different parts of the system as shown in the roles column. There are two ways to adjust this data. One is by selecting a user, pressing Update in the navigation bar, followed by the Maintain User Roles button, which takes you into this screen. The second method is to select a user, then press the User Roles navigation button, which takes you into the same screen. Once in this List User Role by User screen, you will see a list of roles with different sequence numbers. The one with the lowest number is the primary role, and it is this role which provides the identity of the first menu to be displayed in the home page after the user passes through the logon page. Note also that each entry has its own start and end date, so that a user can be granted temporary access to that role for a particular time period. Note also that a role can be moved up and down in the current sequence by selecting it and then pressing either of the Move Up or Move Down buttons. The effect of these role task entries will not be visible until the user passes through the logon screen, at which point the home page will be displayed. This has menu buttons on the top row, which are configured by the system administrator, and a series of optional favorite buttons, which are configured by the individual user. The selection of menu buttons shown on the top row will be those for the starting task of the user's primary role. When these options are read from the database, they will be automatically filtered by the framework in order to exclude those options to which the user has not been granted access. If a button is not visible, then that task cannot be selected. Navigation buttons work in a similar fashion. The only difference is the way in which they are defined. When I create a family of forms, as shown in this diagram, there is a parent task and a series of child tasks. I can only activate any of these child tasks by going to the parent task and picking the child task from a navigation button. The parent task itself may be activated from a menu button, or it may be activated from a navigation button in a different task. For example, if I go to the menu subsystem and choose the list pattern form, Here this shows me all the patterns which are available. It has a series of navigation buttons over here. If I go to the list subsystem task, this has a different set of buttons. Although there are buttons here that have the same name, but they actually bring up different child tasks. For example, here I can select one or more patterns and go into the list task by pattern screen, which shows me all the tasks that belong to that particular pattern. Because I selected several patterns in the parent screen, I can scroll through them using this area here. Now, if I go to the list subsystem task, I can select all entries there. This time when I press the list task navigation button, it brings up a different task, which is list task by subsystem. Again, because I made several selections on the previous screen, I can scroll through them here. If there are more entries that can fit on a single page down here, as shown by this number 205, I can change the number of rows shown on a page by using one of these hyperlinks over here. So I can change the page size to 25 or 50 or 100 if I wish, but the default is usually 10. As well as granting or denying access to particular tasks, there is an additional option within the Radicore framework which can change the visibility of individual fields or columns within an HTML screen. In this database diagram, the role and task tables are as previously described. I use the task field table to identify the names of the fields or columns which I wish to manipulate for an entry on the task table. I use the role task field table to specify how each role should deal with that field within the screen for that task. The options for each field are A. Full access, which is the default, B. No edit, which is the same as read only, or C. No display, which is the same as hidden. I shall now give you a quick demonstration. Go into the menu subsystem, list tasks. This shows the results of the previous search, which was for the data dictionary subsystem, which I should change to the example application, limiting this to tasks of the update 1 pattern. I'm going to select the update person task. I'm going to lock this selection, go into list fields, where you can see I've previously identified 3 fields that I'm going to manipulate: star sign, value 1 and value 2. I'll go into field access, which by default will start by scrolling through all the available roles. I can change this to just the demo role, submit, and there you are, demonstration role. Now by default the access is full. I can show this by going to another tab. I can log on as a demonstration user, go into the prototype menu, example application, list person screen, select a person, go into the update user screen, and here you can see I have full access to the star sign, value 1 and value 2 columns. Go back to that maintenance task and change the access to no edit. Hit submit, return to the screen, refresh the screen, and you can see now star sign, value 1 and value 2 are read only. Back to the maintenance task, change it to no display, hit submit, back to the demonstration user, refresh the screen, and those 3 columns have disappeared. But I can make them reappear again by setting access to full. Press submit, back to the demonstration user, refresh, and voila, those fields have reappeared.